Hi, my name is Steve and welcome back to my channel. In my last video, which was my first on YouTube, I talked about the reason why I decided to join and hopefully why I can inspire one person out there to join. So today I thought about the best topic for me to precede what I had done on the previous one. So I felt I'd love to share my journey in terms of how I've been able to move from where I started in my tech. It all started back in 2014. This was when I finished my bachelor's degree and I finished with degree in information management technology. So pretty much sort of relatively new computer science, something of that nature. Yeah, 2014 I finished and did a couple of certifications after that. Predominantly was around I think 2016 when I went to do a certification on RF engineering and networking. It was an amazing time. That was in Nigeria, Lagos, Lekki. I did the training around Ikeja. Ikeja is also in place in Lagos State. Then I ended up, doing some sort of internship for a couple of months in Lekki for a blue chip company. It was sort of contractor to a telecommunications firm called MTN. But anyway, I didn't get to do that for a very long time. However, the certification and experience was very helpful to get my first job in banking. So I started out with a bank called Sterling, which was back in 2017 January, and worked for around 3 years plus maybe 2 years 9 months. That's almost 3 years. So what I did back then in terms of my job role, I started out as an IT support engineer, which was also very interesting, where you get to interact with a lot of people, help them out with what they needed depending on what problems they had. Then towards the end, around 2019, I got a new role. That was application support, which was more of, instead of having to go to each individual who makes a request, we were supporting the tech team. So we had to do a lot of database, user access management on Microsoft. It was a beautiful experience for myself, going into seeing how a lot of parts were working in the bank. Then 2019 October, I left the company and I moved to Germany. So that was like my big leap, having to leave all that behind and moving on to the next opportunity. So here I came to study IT, that's information technology project management. It was a very good experience for me because I sort of moved away from the core IT tech that I was doing. I moved into project management. It was good learning for myself. I would always recommend someone who really wants to explore management away from IT technical part of it. You could always do project management, where I got to learn a lot about project management, product management. It was very, very interesting. During this time, I think around 2020 was where I started my first IT project management job. It was a project management / coordinator role. It was very interesting. It was as a student. It was August 2020. That was just around where COVID was, almost everywhere. I didn't get to, move directly into the team. I was working remotely a bit, but fantastic experience to start, where all I learned, or most of the things I learned, I was able to practice it. It was fantastic, amazing. It was a travel comparison company, for those who might want to know, where you have to compare hotels, and comparison is actually very, very big in Germany. So they were one of the top companies in this area. I learned a lot about also the travel industry. We were very affected at the time, but nevertheless, in order not to deviate from the whole topic, my first encounter with development, because right now I'm a software developer, my first encounter with application development was in this particular role at this company. That was back in 2020. I started out with a low-code platform. It's an offering from Microsoft. It's called Microsoft Power Apps. At the time, it was relatively new, and I was asked if I could, because of my background in IT, I was asked if I could do that. I felt, yeah, sure, why not? I definitely try that out. So that was like my first encounter with application development. I developed an app within 3 months for around maybe 80 people within the company. It was for internal application. So this was very successful. The company had to, replace what they were using before. I think it was an offering from Google at the time. So my solution that I developed, or this solution I developed, replaced what they were using. So I sort of saved the company money at the time because they didn't have to, pay subscription or anymore for that application. And Microsoft Power Apps you could technically at the time use your Microsoft email, have access to it. It's simply like Excel or maybe a Word document, sort of that offering. Right now, I can't really say exactly because I haven't used it for a very long time. But that was the whole story, anyways. Next, after my experience working with this tool, it was very interesting and I found it very, very nice to be able to develop an application that people would use, solve problems, and something that was effective and efficient. Then I was offered to develop another software. This time around, I had to go learn Django, that was Python. So this also required a lot of learning at the time, but eventually I was able to get that done. There was a catch. Because Django had to do a lot of combination, the way it works, you have to get to connect the back end, the front end is very, very highly connected to each other. You can't really separate it. But one of my colleagues, my senior colleague who I was working with at the time, had to do a lot of CSS, JavaScript on the front end. But I got to do a lot of the back end side of it. And I felt, I would love to know exactly how he did that. So that was like my first experience with front end. So from the low code, I moved because low code has to do with a lot of drag and drop. It's easier. All you have to do is put in logic, connect to a database depending on what you want to use. But in the end, I started learning front end. My first was, CSS, HTML, JavaScript. I started learning that at the time. Then, I was able to then make changes, make some pull requests. That's a pull request is whenever you want to make a change to an existing code or an existing application, you have to send it out for review and it gets reviewed. So I started, working on tasks around, core CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. So it was very interesting. I decided I needed to take this one step further, and I did. So I started learning React. So React is a framework that's built upon JavaScript. I started learning this and it was so interesting that I found a whole lot of new world, limitless world, technically, that I could do a lot of things. So in the end, I learned some aspects of React. I was, pretty much okay with it at the time. So fast forward to 2022, I was planning to move to a different team that was focusing on application development because I told you I started out project management / application development around 2020. So during my time, I was able to switch between project management task and the application development task. I was taking care of that I developed and also doing like project management tasks on the side. So it was a very beautiful experience for me because I got to learn a lot of new things, interacted with new teams. Then 2022, I decided to move into developing an application currently with React. I wanted to move to a new team, but in the end, it was not possible for me to move due to some reasons which I won't mention here. But anyways, I started applying to a job, to different opportunities where I needed to focus more on software development. I left project management at the time. Then I moved to core software development, which I found a consulting company, which I currently work with. It was also a very good experience because I started as a student where I learned more. So the learning never ends, in your tech experience. You have to keep moving from one stage of your journey to the next. All you have to do is basically an endless loop of learning. So you have to keep learning and keep advancing. So my opportunity came that I moved into the company I was working with, and I started working on Angular, React projects, then also Java. I moved into backend Java. So I am technically what you call a full stack developer. And this experience helped me a lot because as for myself, I see myself as someone who gets to learn how to use a new tool and focus on developing a solution. So regardless of what tool software it might be, I saw myself as someone who was really, really happy learning new tools and focusing on developing solutions. So pretty much that was like my journey moving from the company I was with before into like a core software development role. So it was also an amazing journey, still is, it's like absolutely interesting because you get to interact with a lot of people. So there's a difference between the two companies where I moved. The previous one was focused on the language was basically English. It was an international company where very, very diversified. We had so many employees from around the globe. So English was the go-to language, was the first language. Transitioning to a company that was core German was really, really difficult, because it goes beyond developing tools and building software. You have to communicate as a team or communicate in teams. So this was one of the first challenges that I experienced when I was transitioning from the company and moving into a different company. But nevertheless, I was able to do that. And I think I have to make a different video about my experiences on moving from an international speaking English company to a core German speaking company. Well, at the end of the day, it was amazing, interesting. Currently, I am working with this company, and what I would say would be a recap transitioning from a project manager, application developer, now to a software developer. I have, or I would say there are a few things that I learned. Firstly, the mistake that I did when I moved here in 2019. The people I was around told me that it was not possible for me to get an IT job without speaking German. I felt, if I don't know German, how exactly would I get to cope? So at that point, I felt maybe there was no hope at the time for me. I have to focus on, getting by with any job I could get, but I didn't get to focus on the IT industry anymore. So that was like the first mistake. The people I was around at the time were not giving me that advice that I could, be in, or I could follow up on my existing journey, which was the tech. But it changed also towards 2020 when I met some of my friends who we talked about it and they told me it's possible, it's possible, you have to go for it. So that change of mindset made me find an opportunity at the early stage because sort of I left the experience that I had for 3 years and I stopped. There was like a gap where I had to, focus on studies and, forget about finding any job that would be in the IT industry. But nevertheless, I was able to, cross that hurdle. So my advice to anyone who, for example, is traveling from an English speaking country to a non-English speaking country, I can tell you for sure that it's very possible for you to continue on the path that you are. It might not be tech, it might be in the finance space, but there are opportunities out there. You have to just keep an open mind to it. Definitely, you would get it. Another lesson that I learned was switching roles within a company that you're interested to moving for an adventure. I would call it adventure or a journey is like amazing. So I give an example. If you want to move from, let's say, accounting to tech, it's usually very advisable to try and look for roles within your company where you can also volunteer to be a part of a side project. You might not be doing that all the time. So, for example, if you have a 5 day or 3 day working schedule, you could ask your boss to volunteer maybe 2 hours per week, 3 hours per week, depending on what you can give up, to be able to join a side project. That way, you get to understand the day-to-day processes within that new team you want to join, for example, which is the IT department. Then another lesson that I learned, transitioning from one part of IT to the other is you actually need someone within your company who you can call a mentor. It could be maybe someone who's your friend, but the role the person is playing at that time or of your journey would be you get to ask them questions. If you decide to do a project, you can always ask them to be someone who guides you through it. So if you make mistakes, you can always go to review to them. They tell you exactly how you can make changes and how you can improve. So in that, I would call that one of my advices to people who want to switch careers or want to switch different roles. It's always best to do within a company where you're currently working. You can get to volunteer some hours. So if you don't have a company where it's easy for you to do that, so what I recommend is finding projects around, not your company, maybe online where you can volunteer to do some tasks. You can tell them you're just starting, but you really love to, do more. It's if you don't get accepted maybe for the first, you have to keep trying. It's a voluntary role. You have to just tell them that you want to volunteer to do this, and obviously, people out there would all definitely want to help, but you just have to keep trying. You need to have a network of friends. So in your close circle, if you know someone who does what you want to do, or you can, reach out to someone to just, be friends with them, ask them for help. There are a lot of people who really want to help. You know, the world is a place where you have to give back in one way or the other. There are people who have gotten to a certain stage who would love to give back to people, but somehow they don't know. But you might approach somebody and tell them, "Oh, I need your guidance in helping me achieve this part of my journey. I want to learn from you. I want to move to the next stage." And you can just say, if it's okay to, have a 30 minutes call with you from time to time, maybe every week or every 2 days, 3 days, depending on how the person is available to help you. You can just speak to them. So they would happily want to help. If you don't find any, you just have to keep trying. So you have to keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. That's honestly what I can, or that's the best thing I can say. So I've just been able to narrate my journey from while I was back in my home country, Nigeria. Started as a banker, not technically in the having to handle all the finance and all that, but it was the IT part of banking. It was very fun. Moved to project management, then started as an application developer within the same company I was. Then I transitioned to a software developer, which I am right now. So I'm I'd love to say or encourage anybody out there who wants to transition from one role to the other. You can always reach out to me on the chat. My website will be linked down below. You can reach out to me on contact form, any of the social media platform. You can always send a message. So I'll be happy to help and guide you wherever possible. So yeah, I'm rooting for you, and hopefully you can achieve that next step of your career, and also you can learn from me. If I've touched you in any way, that'd be really nice. So yeah, thanks for staying this long and watching this my video on my tech journey, and yeah, I see you on the next video.